morning. My name is Tim Sheldon, and I work for the Ministry of Defence. I have been working as part of the MOD now for just over 20 years in terms of my professional career. And in doing that, I've worked in a variety of acquisition, procurement-based roles. Personally based in the West Country, I work in Bristol with MOD colleagues. And for the last year and a half within my organisation, I have been leading the establishment of a new function, project controls, which sounds very relevant in the context of why we're here today. So I'm going to use the next 35 minutes or so to give you an overview of the work that we've been doing in standing up that project controls function, why we've done it, where we are, and how it's beginning to add real value now in helping the UK Ministry of Defence and Defence Equipment and Support to successfully deliver projects across a range of areas in terms of the types of business that we do. So who are we? Defence Equipment and Support. We've been around now in our current form for over 10 years. And we are based, headquartered over in Bristol, where about 7,500 colleagues are based on the Abbeywood site. But we are a national organisation in terms of our geography, and we work from Scotland, where we are deeply involved with the construction of warships like the aircraft carrier that the previous speaker mentioned, through the northwest of the country with our aerospace hub with BAE at Warton and Samlesbury, over in Barrow, where we design and build submarines, through the likes of Derby, where we have our nuclear reactor production facility with Rolls-Royce, through down to the very south coast, the Portsmouth, Plymouth, where we have the naval bases, major hubs in terms of supporting warships and submarines, keeping them in service for the armed forces. So we are a national endeavour, and we support and procure a complete spectrum of military equipment. A lot of folk gravitate to the heavy metal, and we saw some pictures of that from the previous speaker in terms of the submarine program and the aircraft carrier program. Both of those multi-billion pound, multi-year endeavours. But we transition from that all the way through to things like defence clothing, where actually, we buy an awful lot of clothes for soldiers, sailors and airmen within the UK MOD. In fact, last month we got a group of school kids in from our local schools around our site in Bristol, and we gave them the good traditional spiel about what we do in terms of the sort of stuff that we buy. And we ended up, believe it or not, talking about socks. And they said, why socks? Which I thought was a great question from some 15 and 16-year-olds. But you think about it in terms of socks, we've got 80,000 soldiers within the army, and they need an awful lot of socks. And actually getting socks correct for the environment, be that in the Arctic, be that in the extreme heat of the desert, the army marches on its feet, and it's actually a very important bit of kit. So we do a tremendous range of equipments, a tremendous range from high-end all the way through to the likes of socks, as I've mentioned. But we also do a lot in terms of support. And actually, we spend more each year supporting equipment that we own than going out and buying new equipment for the armed forces. And to put that into context in terms of numbers, we spend round about £14 billion a year in terms of buying new equipment and supporting legacy equipment. So that is an awful lot of budget that we are spending year on year supporting the armed forces. We are a bespoke trading entity, and I'll come on to talking a little bit about that and what it means for us, because that's important in the context of setting up the project controls function within the organisation. As I've said, we are geographically dispersed, headquartered in Bristol, and we are a mix of civilians, predominantly civilian staff, but we do have some key members of our team who come in from all three of the armed forces. The military make up around about 15% of our workforce, so we are very diverse as a group, which is terrific in terms of the value that brings within the organisation. We operate in quite a challenging environment as far as defence acquisition is concerned. And what has been clear over the near recent past, the last 10, 15, 20 years, is the complexity of the sorts of projects that we are seeking to develop and bring into service. And I just put up here on the screen some problem children in that context in terms of delivering projects to agreed performance cost and time envelopes, the very essence of what project delivery is all about. The F-35 aircraft, an acquisition being led by the United States but collaborative around the world, including the United Kingdom, set off around the turn of the millennium and actually has suffered very significant cost growth and schedule delay relative to its initial estimates that were originally approved as far as the US Department of Defense were concerned. A lot of work's been done, particularly over the last 7 or so years, to stabilize that program. Around the 2010, 2011, 2012 period, it went through a very troubled patch in terms of its development. In the middle there, the Hobart. This is a project which is being led by the Australian government to design, develop and build 3 new anti-air warfare destroyers. An original program cost of around about 8 billion Australian dollars. Actually, whilst it has been delivered in terms of the first of class was commissioned in September, it was over $1 billion Australian dollars over that original budget, and it was a number of years late against its original timeline for delivery. And then the final project there, the Nimrod MRA-4, project of UK origin, which had a very troubled and checkered history from its approval in 1997 through to its ultimate cancellation in 2010. And at that point, over £3 billion had been spent on that particular project when it was stopped as a result of the 2010 Strategic Defence and Security Review. So these projects, very, very challenging, very complex, very demanding in terms of the technologies, in terms of the engagement with the market, the players that are involved, and really challenging in terms of delivery. Yet, budgets are tight, and we want to do the very best that we can with the budget that we have moving forwards. They can, however, be a source of great pride, and I'm sure most of you saw over the summer, terrific sight, first of all, of the Queen Elizabeth aircraft carrier leaving Rosyth and managing to make it out under those bridges over the Firth of Forth, and then in August, it entering Portsmouth for the first time. A national endeavour, this ship was built across the United Kingdom in multiple shipyards, effectively assembled in Rosyth, and is now actually out at sea as we speak, undertaking further periods of trial as it works itself up to enter into service and become the flagship of the Royal Navy, probably for the next 40 to 50 years in terms of its in-service life. And a source for all involved, and there were some folk in this room who were involved in that project, a source of great pride in terms of the delivery of something as complex as that as far as the armed forces were concerned. Set against all of that, there has been a backdrop of a desire to improve as far as defence acquisition is concerned. There was a review that was commissioned by the Labour government in 2008, it reported in 2009, on acquisition reform. And that led to a number of very significant changes with regards to how acquisition is managed within the United Kingdom. In 2014, it led to the establishment of Defence Equipment and Support as a bespoke trading entity. So you may be asking, what does that mean? Well, it means that we've remained civil servants, but we have gained a number of important freedoms associated with how we operate as an organisation. And that's quite important in terms of what it is we're actually trying to achieve. We launched on a transformation programme, and that programme brought in external expertise. Competition was run, and a number of key partners came into the organisation, specifically Bechtel and specifically CH2M Hill, and they've been working with us ever since. And that's been really important in providing an injection of external expertise into our organisation so that we can capitalise on standard commercial practices with regards to how we go about delivering our work. With a key focus on our upskilling, a key focus on standardising how we work and modernising how we work, really to drive better performance in terms of project delivery. Now, a key aspect of those changes was to introduce what we have termed the balanced matrix. And the balanced matrix demonstrated here in terms of the vertical and the horizontal bars. Now, the vertical bars are pretty obvious in terms of the delivery groupings within my organisation. So those are focused on our frontline commands. And what do I mean by that? The likes of the Army, the likes of the Royal Navy, the Royal Air Force. Very clear in terms of who they are as customers, and we've aligned our business in that direction in terms of the vertical lines. So to bring that to life, our Chief of Material Air, who's an Air Marshal, Julian Young, leads the DE&S's engagement with the Royal Air Force. Very clear, very direct in terms of alignment of our business with our customers moving forwards. The fundamental evolution was the introduction of those horizontal bars. And those horizontal bars are what we are now terming the functions within the organisation. And those cover standard areas that you would expect in terms of project definition and delivery, project management, commercial, finance, integrated logistics. But a fundamental change was the introduction of a new function. Any ideas what that was? Project controls. Project controls as a new function, because it hadn't existed historically. We'd had project management, we'd had finance within the organisation, but we had not discreetly identified and supported project controls. But it was very clear, working with those external organisations I talked about, that for them project controls was there as a dedicated function and was an important ingredient in terms of how they brought their project teams together and how they managed project delivery. So project controls was effectively stood up, and I moved across at the beginning of 2016 to lead the charge to set up the function, which we did in terms of standing up on the 1st of April this year. So we're now, I think, in our 8th month of operation as a new function, the new kid on the block. Some of our functions have been around for quite a while within the Ministry of Defence. I'm led to believe that the finance and accounting function has been around since the time of Christ. And working with some of my F&A colleagues, I can believe that in terms of its longevity. But we are the new kid on the block. And you might be asking, well, what are these functions here to do? Again, we were really clear on that in terms of what we're about. It's defined around what it is we want our people to do in terms of the processes, the type of work that they do, so we can drive standardisation in that space. It was around the supporting tooling, and I'll come on to that in terms of the tooling that we use in the project control space and in the other functions, again to drive a degree of standardisation around that, and then to support upskilling in terms of its operation. And it was also around the people, because what is any business these days without the people that make it up as an organisation? And so how we bring folk into DE&S, how we support them, how we support their development, how we support their careers to give them good opportunities moving forwards, that again is a fundamental element of what the functions have been set up to do and manage across our workforce. So our job is very much to support delivery, those vertical lines, having the right people with the right training, with the right business processes and the right tools to deliver projects and support that delivery in a consistent way across the organisation. So what is Project Controls here to do? There you can see our vision, and we've positioned ourselves very significantly alongside our project management function, our project management colleagues, who clearly are there in terms of leading the projects, but we very much see ourselves in terms of being at the right hand of the project manager in terms of what we're there to do, in terms of understanding what is going on, what has been happening, and perhaps more importantly, what we think is going to happen as a consequence of that. And taking then that decisive action in terms of understanding and presenting a view around what we need to do to keep our projects on an even keel. Change is inevitable, and we've talked about the longevity of projects. Some of our projects will literally run on for decades. We're designing and starting to build submarines now that will be built through the 2020s and into the 2030s. So we need to manage change on top of that moving forwards. And we've had to bring this to life in terms of explaining the role. So last week I was with BAE colleagues up near Birmingham. They were using the pilot and navigator analogy. The project manager there is the pilot of the project, and project controls there to navigate in terms of what you're doing. From a DE&S perspective, we've gone into the bold world of Star Trek, where we've looked at Captain Kirk there being the project manager on the bridge of the Enterprise in charge. And who do you think would be the project controller on the bridge of the Enterprise? Spock. That logical guy, understanding what's going on and presenting the evidence to the captain in terms of what the options are and what needs to be done. Now, Jim didn't always do what Spock recommended, but he always listened to him, and he often did in terms of the overall sort of approach. So we've done that in terms of establishing the function, and we've been very clear on the sub-functions. You can see them listed there. Some very obvious ones in the context of project controls and the groups, the organisations that are represented here today. And within DE&S, we had been doing a lot of this to a greater or lesser extent through some of the previous functions like project management and finance and accounting. A very new role, though, is the project controls manager. And we've not really had that role within Defence Equipment and Support to date, in terms of the individual within the team who effectively sits over the strands of controls and can pull that together to give that rich picture in relation to what's going on. Because I would argue that in order to do and give that rounded advice to the project manager, you've got to integrate what you're seeing with regards to your baseline in terms of cost, schedule, risk, with regards to that rich sort of picture. So that's a new role, and that's been an area where we have been spending some time in terms of training folk up and bringing in folk from outside with that sort of expertise into our organisation. So why do we matter? Data, 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 understanding the data, understanding what's going on. I've seen it in my professional career in terms of projects that have been really on top of their data, got a really good understanding of what's in play, and really driving their suppliers in terms of delivery moving forwards. And I've seen the reverse of that in terms of where that control and understanding has been lost. I do believe that by the DE&S sharpening its pencils and getting seriously into project controls, that will act as a catalyst for a number of our suppliers to reinforce the good work that they already do in that area. But I think we want more in terms of moving ahead. We definitely want to reduce the variability of how we operate. We're not consistent at the present time. And a lot of that, I think, is down to history and the fact that we have had different ways of working in different project teams across our organisation. I've laboured the fact, and it is really important, that we do want to standardise how we operate now in these key areas around scheduling, risk, cost management, etc., moving forwards. And fundamentally, for our staff, making it easier, making it simpler in relation to how we operate, because there is a standard way. Today, for folk in our organisation moving between teams, often there are elements of retraining that's required because teams do it differently. We're working towards an environment where actually the how folk work is the same across our teams, to make it easier in terms of training, to make it easier then in terms of folk moving between teams in terms of supporting their career. And the benefits, I think, speak for themselves. I hope you'll all agree with this as project controls professionals in terms of what we're here to do. I think that control is really important. I'd emphasise foresight. There's a lot of management information, there's a lot of data around and management information, but often that has been quite rear-view mirror focused in terms of looking at what has happened. We have not been as clever in terms of looking ahead in a predictive sense. And we want to move into that space in a big way with techniques like earned value management in terms of moving ahead. Fundamentally, though, it is all about reliable outputs. I highlighted how much we spend. We spend an awful lot of taxpayers' money each year, and we want to make the best or deliver the best value that we can out of that spend year on year moving forwards. So I now want to move into what we've actually done in relation to setting up this project controls function. and I'm going to start on the how we actually operate, because we have brought in a pretty simplistic approach, conceptual approach anyway, in terms of, from a controls perspective, how we are managing our projects moving forwards. This is focused around baseline management, with the emphasis on setting a baseline, defining that baseline in a cost and in a schedule sense relative to an agreed scope, and going through that to establish a performance measurement baseline with an element of management reserve, taking that through our approvals process and our commercial contracting process to effectively nut down a position, that baseline, against which then we can drive delivery through managing and maintaining the control against that baseline moving ahead. I mentioned before change. Change is inevitable. That needs to be managed in a controlled way. And we want to use standard control techniques like earned value management on our projects to drive better understanding, better control, better foresight in regards to delivery moving forwards. Now, we've developed a much richer view underneath that in terms of processes and procedures, and we're working now across the business to train folk in terms of how to operate with regards to that simple framework moving forwards. Not revolutionary stuff at all, but actually really, really important in terms of driving consistency, I would argue a degree of simplicity compared to where we have been historically as an organisation moving forwards. And we're framing that through the use of tooling across the business in terms of the provision of standard tools to really drive and emphasise that standard way of working. Because if I cast back 3 or 4 years, we were using multiple tools in different project teams where we actually, I believe, should have been operating in a consistent way. And that's the journey that we're now on across the business. We've started with a couple of quick wins, and I'll highlight those, and then move to the pièce de résistance in terms of a very significant change in terms of our P3M project. So, costing. We have a lot of projects, over 500 in terms of our order book. And all of those projects need to build a view on cost in terms of estimating. And we have developed something called the James Cost Model, which we've now issued out across our business for teams, particularly on our smaller value projects. We have category A, B, C, and D in terms of and that's linked to the value of our projects. So projects up to the 100 million mark, that's a small project in an MOD sort of sense, given the size and scale of our larger sort of projects. But the essence here was to provide our estimators with a standard, pre-verified, validated tool that they can take and use as the frame then for building the estimate on their project. Now that sounds pretty obvious as an approach, but we weren't there 3 years ago in terms of it was very much down to the folk in the project team to design, develop their own model, maybe get one from a friend that had done one the year before, and build on that moving forwards. So we've turned that around now in terms of having one VMV'd, readily available model, and we've provided training and support across the business. So our estimators now are spending time thinking about the inputs and the outputs, rather than spending time thinking about how on earth do I build a cost model framework, which will then frame the analysis moving forwards. So that has proved very successful, and what has been really positive around the application of James in the business was we got a lot of pull. There's nothing worse than when you're trying to push something on an organisation. When folk are phoning up and saying, I want it, can I get on the training? Because actually this is helpful to me. You're in a sweet spot in terms of what it is you're trying to do. The next area then was around risk, active risk manager. And we've pushed out over the last 18 months and driven a standard approach in relation to the use of active risk manager as our risk capture tool across the whole of the organisation. We've mandated its use, and we have updated the application, and we're now providing training and support consistently across the business with regards to the use of ARM. So we're still on a journey there, but again, very important in terms of coalescing our risk community around a standard tool to support their business moving forwards. Now those were both quick wins, things that we were able to move on relatively easily to shine a torch in terms of a direction of travel. Our ambition in this area, though, is much greater than that. And we've embarked on a very important program, P3M, Portfolio Program Project Management, buying a suite of products from Oracle, which we're configuring to operate in the project controls environment for the totality of our business. We started that journey around planning and scheduling with the procurement of Primavera, P6, which we're now in the process of rolling out as an enterprise tool across our business. Historically, a number of our teams have been using EPM 2010. We're coming off that as our scheduling tool, moving into Primavera. I've also bought an application called Unifier, which we have configured now as a cost engine, which our cost control finance folk will use to understand and manage costs in terms of historic and predicted with regards to the projects that we're delivering. We're using a combination of those tools with the OBIEE suite, which is a business intelligence capability, to effectively drive then the production of standardized CPR reporting to enable us to undertake earned value management across our projects with a level of automation which is important. Time recording across the business. So we've got an application called Team Member, where we're requiring our teams to effectively book their time with regards to the effort that they're putting in against agreed baselines moving forwards. And finally, a schedule risk analysis tool, Primavera Risk Analyzer. Now, that is a very significant transformation for our business, linked to the process framework that I talked about, because this enables us to capture the setting of those baselines, and it gives us then the tooling framework to manage delivery against those baselines moving forwards with a level of sophistication that we have just not had historically across our business. There have been pockets, but it hasn't been consistent. And that's what we're now driving towards across our business. This is a huge elephant. You can't eat an elephant all in one sitting, so we are breaking it up into bite-sized chunks. We're rolling it out through the course of this year and next. The initial focus has been on the planning and scheduling area. We've piloted with a number of exemplar projects, 17 across our business, to really wire brush what it is we're trying to do. And we're now moving into Release 2 and testing Release 2, which is moving into the cost management side in terms of Unifier, that link into the time recording, change management as a workflow process, and also the time recording through the team member tool. So very ambitious in terms of what we're doing in terms of moving forwards, but I believe really pivotal if we're going to get project controls embedded and working in the way in which we want moving forwards. Now, we don't operate in isolation. The interface with industry is very, very important in relation to what we're doing. And so we have been refreshing and updating our guide in relation to how we want to interface with industry in the context of project controls, those baselines, the contracting baseline that we agree with our suppliers, and how their project controls approach interfaces with our own. And that is really, really important, particularly given the complexity of our supply chain. You know, you look at one of those submarines that we saw in the previous presentation, and it is a very complex supply chain in terms of the design and build of the submarine, the design and build of the reactor, their integration, and other systems that come in. So we've refreshed that guide, and we're now pushing that out as a mandated approach across our business moving forwards in very active consultation with our suppliers. And indeed, only yesterday we held an industry day at Abbey Wood, our headquarters in Bristol, with a range of suppliers, and you know, they had 3/4 of an hour on this in terms of what we're doing with regards to project controls and that industry interface. Indeed, we've got one of our suppliers, BAE, who are one of the exemplars, to actually stand up and give their view on this from one of the major projects that we're working on with them moving forwards. So standard processes, standard tools across our business with a clear interface with our suppliers in terms of setting up that project controls framework moving forwards. The final area for me to talk about this morning is our people. So we've had to get our hands around our folk, and you can see the numbers there in relation to the sub-disciplines. There are a lot of project controls managers within the organisation, and that is a result of where we've been from a legacy perspective in terms of folk that have done some risk management, some planning and scheduling, maybe some estimating, but haven't necessarily got a dedicated role with regards to those areas. So one of the things that we're doing, working with our delivery areas, is to move us away from being more generalist project management staff, particularly at the more junior levels, to becoming more specialist, and an increasing number of specialist roles in cost control, estimating, risk, and planning and scheduling. And we've been working in terms of framing, the value proposition for coming to work within the DE&S. We have been doing a lot of recruitment activity, and we've been very successful in terms of interfacing and bringing folk in at the start of their careers. So we've got some very good relationships with local employers, with local education establishments around the country, and we have significantly increased the number of apprentices, graduates, and interns that we're bringing into project controls, stroke project management, because we're doing it collaboratively with our PM colleagues. We are finding it quite a challenge sort of mid-career in terms of bringing folk in. And my own personal view on that is I think there's probably a national skills shortage of qualified and experienced folk in a number of these subdisciplines. And many of us in this room, in terms of employers, are fishing in the same pond. Because I've yet to find an industrial supplier or another part of government that says, Tim, we have got loads of trained risk folk and planners, we're completely full. We don't need any more folk. I've not found anyone who has been in that happy space to date. I think we're all struggling in that sort of space. So we are getting some folk in, but as I say, we have massively enhanced our recruitment at level 1, effectively a bring them in and grow our own strategy in terms of moving forwards, recognising that we've got some terrific projects, some terrific work for project controls folk to get into, a huge range of things to get involved in. We've also been developing our learning and support for those folk, a huge upskilling agenda within the organisation. And again, that's for folk who perhaps want to retrain. I've been a project controls manager and I want to become a planner and scheduler. We've put in place reskilling programs for our current staff and upskilling programs for folk in those disciplines. And we're putting in place development programs and development pathways for folk that are coming into the organisation. We have been doing that in partnership with 2 key functions, because I think there are 2 key overlaps in our organisation with regards to the project controls function. One of those is project management, and we expect and want to see a healthy interchange between PM, project management, and project controls in terms of folk. We term it Z-pathing in terms of moving between the functions. And the other function is finance and accounting, given our cost control finance work and cost control accounting. So again, we want a healthy interchange between the finance and accounting function and the project controls function in terms of moving forwards. And we've also been looking at how we can effectively operate a license to practice approach in terms of being really clear that folk are proficient against their respective role profiles. That's the bar that we would expect for the role and the assignment that they are in. So I'm rounding off now in terms of time. We'll have some time for a few questions. But I thought I'd just finish off by thinking about some of the challenges. We're partway through embedding these new ways of working. And that, I think, is going well. We've been very well supported by our MSP, Managed Service Provider colleagues from Bechtel and CH. And that now is working its way through the business. We do need to think about that engagement with our other functions. Project delivery is a team sport, without a shadow of a doubt. You need that team well-oiled, working together in a harmonious way. So the relationship, particularly between project controls and project management, is really, really important. So we are doing a lot of work within our organisation to educate our PM community as to who we are and what we can do and how we can help. And there is a lot of very conscious engagement going on now. We had several sessions last week, groups as big as this from the DE&S PM community, really reinforcing what project controls is all about. I've mentioned finance, very important in terms of dealing with them, and commercial, because of that interface with industry. Again, the DE&S, Defence Equipment and Support, doesn't operate in a bubble. Yeah, we are a team sport with our industrial suppliers. And we've been doing a lot of work in terms of engagement with them around how they are going to interface with what we're doing to get this to work end to end. And that's part of what yesterday was about in our organisation with our key industrial partners. And then finally, people. You know, bringing folk into the organisation, giving them a good, vibrant career that they can move forwards in, so they are happy and that they stay in the organisation in terms of moving forwards. That is a key area of challenge, I think, for pretty much every organisation operating in this space moving ahead. But one that we are taking some very positive steps in to address as an organisation. So that's been quite a quick canter through in terms of where we've been, quite a journey over the course of the last year and a half. As I said, I arrived at the start of 2016. There were some very interesting PowerPoints in relation to what we were trying to do. Taking those PowerPoints to a function stood up now of 1,500 folk and developing in the way in which I've outlined has been a tremendously positive experience for me and colleagues involved in that. And we're now really beginning to help in terms of driving consistency and driving reliability into the delivery of a really important project portfolio as far as the nation is concerned with regards to the MOD and the defence of the realm. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sheldon. Wonderful presentation. Just want to know if you can share a little bit of the cost of implementing this transition. And in terms of benefits that are coming out, has those numbers being, you're able to justify and convince your team that the benefits in terms of coming out of this program are actually outweighing the rollout of this initiative?
So in terms of cost and benefits of the program. So the cost and benefits of the program relate to DE&S transformation, okay, of which project controls was a key element in relation to what we're trying to do. So there was a business case and a benefits case written around the whole program in relation to the amount of money that we have spent. And, you know, in terms of bringing in all of the changes, the technical changes, the HR changes with the managed service providers, there were a number of contracts that were placed around that, which are running still. They've run from 2014 through to May of next year is the current life of the contract. And in there, you know, we're talking tens of millions of pounds in terms of spend in relation to that level of support you know, over each year. With regards to the benefits, those are programmatic, both in terms of the reduction of the costs of operating defence equipment and support, and there are a clear benefits reduction there, and that's in the hundreds of millions in terms of reduction over about a 4-year period. And the macro program, the equipment program, where the benefits are in the, I think, 4 to 5 billion sort of mark in terms of reduced cost on the delivery of the program moving forwards. So there is a very clear benefits case, and the National Audit Office, I strongly suspect, will come in at the end of the program to review progress against that baseline that we had. What we have enacted on that program, of course, are project controls around the baseline and what's happened subsequent to it.
Hi, thank you for that. Implementing project controls across any new organisation always leads to a load of change. What impact has that had on retention of your current staff with your support, your contractors coming in to help?
So in terms of retention within the function, the retention or the churn rate, if you like, the flip side in terms of how many folk are going, for us is actually relatively low as an organisation. So I think it's around about 7 or 8%, okay, which I'm told is relatively low, you know, compared to normal organisations in terms of benchmark. So we've not seen a huge level of attrition. There has been some movement between functions. So, and that's been part around getting the brand of project controls established, because suddenly we've had folk who may have been in the organisation for 10 years. I do risk, I'm a project manager. No, you're a project controller now. No, I'm a project manager, that's what I do. I want to be a project manager. So there's been some movements, okay, around folk adjusting, if you like, to the new roles and the new environment. Not huge, in terms of what's been going on. And we've been countering that with some relentless education around what project controls is. But you can understand that, can't you? If you've been working in an organisation for 10 or 15 years and you've been told, I do risk and I'm a project manager, there's a change curve that you've got to go through to actually say, well, actually no. In the new organisation moving forwards, you're in project controls. And it's been similar with folk who historically have been in the DE&S finance function who now found themselves within project controls. So it's been relatively low in terms of folk leaving the organisation, but there has been some movement internally between the functions. That is steadying off now, and actually, as project controls has become established, and a few myths have been broken about who we are and what we do, actually we're starting to see more of a movement actually into the function, which is very positive, because folk are seeing the value associated with what we do. So we've worked hard to establish that brand, over the course of the last 8 months, and sort of leading into it as well.
What you have described, it's all about the program management. The one you told that you have done project in different areas and then you assemble everything. It was a project. It's not a project management. It was a program management. So when you are monitoring on project level or a program level.
Well, it's a really good question about what is a program and what is a project.
Yeah, it means these are interrelated projects. Has been come to a program.
Yeah, we're focusing really on the project, in terms of the management of the project, and we tend within the ministry to approve at a project level and track at a project level in relation to what we do. Clearly, though, in some areas you do need to take a program view. So shipbuilding, submarine building, you can't look at those projects in isolation because there are large fixed overheads associated with those businesses which need to be absorbed against the project delivery work that we do. So we will focus on the project, but where it's relevant, we'll also take in a programmatic context. And there are some very specific domains, maritime, the weapons area also, where we've got a team complex weapons program with MBDA, where actually we'll look programmatically as well as at project level. But our accountability approach within the organisation is predominantly at a project level in terms of the project, what the project manager will bring forwards in an approval and what they'll be held to account for against that approval moving forwards.
Hi, Tim.
Hi.
Great talk. Really enjoyed it. With any business change transformation program, inevitably you sort of hit some resistance. I just wonder whether there's pockets of resistance that you're still trying to deal with and you're still trying to bring people on board and how you're dealing with that challenge.
I think that's inevitable in any change, in relation to where we're at. How are we dealing with it? Well, we're dealing with it through the continued support of our managed service providers, and they're providing technical coaches out into our domains to really act as a catalyst in terms of moving forwards. We're developing an in-house capability with respect to that as well. That's very, very important. We're tackling it through this ruthless standardization, in relation to process and tools, because now if you want to do scheduling, you've got to use Primavera within the organisation. There's no optionality about it, in relation to how you're doing your business. So we're being quite hard there in terms of, if you want to do it, this is the tool, this is the way, please get on with it. But it's not all stick. There is a heart side as well. So we've been pushing hard on the communications front across the function, both with the leadership. So as a leadership group, we get together quite regularly. There are some in the room, and we're meeting at least quarterly for a day, which is important in terms of, the top 150 within the function really being aligned, understanding what's going on, so they can take that message out to the teams with regards to what's going on, and focused, targeted communications as well. Be that through the function, we have a monthly function update, or be that through broader communications. We've got a corporate campaign that we're working within the organisation. So a bit of drive around you must, but also hearts and minds in terms of engagement with staff. But it's a long road, but I think we're well down it now. We're a good 2 years into these changes, 8 months into the new function. We took about a year to prep and get ready for that. The leadership has been very united, very clear on the direction of travel, and that's been hugely helpful in terms of saying, this is where we're going, off we go. I'm out of time, I'm afraid, but I'm here all day, so if you've got any questions, delighted to have a chat. Thank you very much for your attention. Been a great opportunity to tell you what we're doing. We've got a stand from DE&S here, so if you want to find out more, talking to folk within the organisation, we'd be delighted to have a chat through the course of the day. Thanks for your time.